Computer. All right. Well, as everybody knows, this is our annual meeting. We have Dr. Mary Meyer from the University of Minnesota, the Extension horticulturist, and also a professor. And she's going to give us a little presentation on the best grasses for Minnesota with a highlight to our water gardens. Dr. Meyer, go ahead. If you want to go ahead and share your screen.
Yes, great. Thanks, Steve. Thanks for inviting me. Let's see, I think you need to do one more click. It says host as disabled screen sharing.
Okay.
So I think we'll get that done in a minute. I'm so happy to talk to you guys in the Water Garden Society. Steve and I were talking about the fun things that your club does, and the pond tour, the water garden tour. So it's really cool to for me to talk to you. How does that look, Steve? Is it going to work now? Yes, there we go.
There we go. Okay, here we go.
Good.
Get out of here.
Yeah. So.
There we go.
Yeah, great, good. So I'm really happy to talk to you guys. I'm going to talk about grasses, especially good for water, and as well as some of the highlights of benefits of grasses, what's new with grasses. Many of you probably have used grasses, maybe not necessarily in your water garden, but other parts of your landscape. So I hope when I'm done today, you've got some ideas for both places around your water garden as well as places in your landscape. So if you have a chance in the next couple of weeks, I would urge you to go to the Arboretum and see the grass collection that's there. Lots of my pictures today will be from the collection. This first picture is the post in the middle is the sign that says parking for the grass collection and the maze. So you can see the Arboretum Drive in the background. So if you go around 3 Mile Drive, about 2/3 of the way you come to the grass collection. It is beautiful now. I have to say that the fall color this year is exceptional on the trees and on the grasses. So I'll show you some of the fall colors, but it's really, really beautiful now. You do need a ticket to get in the Arboretum. You can easily get that on the website. And if you are a member, you can, now I've covered up where I changed my slides. If you're a member, otherwise, it's a regular entry for membership, but we have a big pumpkin display out there, lots of squash, etc. So really think about coming to the Arboretum. And as Steve said, I did a handout, and the handout was emailed to you, and you can look at it later. If you want to take any notes, you can, but all the words that are on my slides are on the handout. So you don't have to worry about copying down any of these. And then there's a plant list with this. So all of the slides that I talk about, they're on the handout. So I want to just remind folks about the benefits of grasses, the environmental benefits as well as the human benefits. The environmental benefits are what grasses do for our soil and how they have minimal requirements as far as nutrients go and water once they're established. They're really great for binding the soil. We'll talk about a couple today that do have rhizomes, and that's great for lake shores or along the edges of ponds where we don't want to have erosion. So grasses are right now at the grass collection, there are a large number of birds going through the collection because there are a lot of ripe seeds, and the birds are up there feeding on the seeds. I don't think that deer eat grasses very much. But rabbits will occasionally feed on grasses. So we do have some issues with rabbits. But what I want to talk about first is the fact that grasses are larval food for many of our native skipper butterflies. And um, I don't know how many people really realize this. I think quite a few people now probably do because we've been talking about it for a while. But this map just shows the big prairie areas in central United States. We live in the darkest green area, the tall grass prairie. That's the area that has shrunk the most. The tall grass, dark green area used to be the size of Texas. It's now the size of Rhode Island. So while we have some preserves like this one, which is way up in the northern part of the state, up near Crookston, it's a big preserve. You can go up there and walk in that and really feel what it was like to be in the endless prairie, the ocean of a prairie. For the most part, the prairie is really, really gone. And the native grass habitat that used to be here that supported so many birds, wildlife, butterflies, etc., has been so reduced that all of the wildlife, animals, insects, and so on that lived in the native grass areas, they're reduced also. It just stands to reason if the habitat has been reduced, these species will be reduced also. So for a long time, even though I studied grasses and thought I knew quite a bit about grasses, I didn't really understand this relationship with a native Lepidopterus. And I have published some information on this. I have some posters. There's a big poster that you can get online if you're really interested in a lot of this with the individual grasses and the species that feed on different grasses. And there's a little bit of a table that's in your handout about this as well. But what it boils down to is specific skipper butterflies feed on specific grasses when they're the caterpillars. And they don't feed on anything else. So if they're so specific, some of them will only feed on prairie dropseed or little blue stem or blue grama. And so when the habitat has been reduced, there are fewer of these butterflies that are around. So the adult butterflies that you see here, 2 butterflies and a dragonfly, the adults feed on flowers like our prairie flowers, liatris, echinacea, and so on, but the larvae feed on grasses. So they really have to have both grasses and flowers for their whole life cycle. So this is kind of a blown up picture of a caterpillar of the Dakota skipper. Now, this would really be like 1 digit of your finger, very small. These things are very small. This one is kind of a dusky gray color, but oftentimes they're really green and small. And the adults then are these traditional, these skippers have kind of a different wing. Sometimes it's folded flat, and other times you can see there's the 2 dimensions to their wings, like the one on the left that's there. But this is a picture showing 9 different species of these skippers. These are all threatened and endangered now in Minnesota and most of the upper Midwest. Again, this is due to their habitat loss. So on the handout, this is pretty similar, if not the same thing that's on your handout. Just talks about the number of species by grass that we have where these skippers, mostly skippers, are supported by grasses. So that is work that hadn't really been documented before because it's hard to tell these little larva caterpillars which one is which. And for a lot of entomologists, it was hard to tell the grasses apart, especially when they're young. So also in your handout, more towards the end, is this, I hope you can read this, it's a little bit grayed out, but this shows you if you plant the grass plus the flower, you will have the plants for the complete life cycle of many of our native skippers. So you might have many of these in your landscape already, but this is a way to just be certain that you have the plants that will help these native butterflies. And then I wanted to mention that we have all this information, the tables and much more information in one of the newer publications. This is a free book that you can download and look at on your computer. It's about 70 pages. And we're in the process of the University of Minnesota Libraries putting this in a new, different format that anybody can download. So if you have an Apple or iPhone, that was the format we used originally. But now the new version is going to come out. It hasn't quite come out yet, but it should be. I thought by today I would hear, but I haven't. So I do expect any day to hear, and we'll be sending that information out through the extension information. So I want to start now talking about some specific grasses. And then these are kind of grasses in general that are great. And then we'll talk about good ones for water gardens as well. So the first group of 4 or 5 grasses are drier or upland sites. So this is kind of like, should I really talk about this? This is the Water Garden Society. So this is like the opposite end of what you would want to use in your water garden. But like, if you have a rain garden or the top of an area that's dry, these are good grasses for that area. And the Butaloas, this is Blonde Ambition. This is a lovely plant that's only about 30 inches tall. And Blonde Ambition is a big, vigorous grower, but unfortunately, it is not hardy in Minnesota. However, you can grow it and it flowers a lot even as an annual. But if you buy just the species of this blue grama, that is a little shorter and that one is fully hardy. So in addition to the Arboretum, Nuremberg Gardens is a fabulous place to go see grasses and other perennials. Their water garden is the lakeshore of Lake Minnetonka, where they have a habitat restoration. They have a boathouse overlooking the water. But their garden otherwise is a beautiful collection of wonderful hardy perennials for Minnesota. This is Blonde Ambition here at Nuremberg Gardens a couple of years ago. They grow this plant as an annual. So this gets a lot of growth in 1 year. Other locations where I've seen this planted, this was in a shopping center parking lot. This did not make it because, as I said, this cultivar comes from New Mexico, and that is not really hardy for us. The other Butaloa is side oats grama, which you can see here in this boulevard planting with hosta, and this is catnip here, catmint. And this is the Butaloa curtipendula or side oats grama. This is another one that likes really upland dry sites, but the one on the top there, side oats grama, is taller. It is closer to 3 feet tall, 2 to 3 feet tall. The one in the foreground, blue grama, is a shorter one, so more like 2 feet tall, unless you have Blonde Ambition. So those are 2 of our native grasses that are great for drier sites. And then little bluestem is a wonderful grass for dry conditions. These were several different cultivars of little bluestem that we evaluated for, well, I'm still evaluating them, but that was part of a 3-year national trial that we completed in 2015. And then Blue Heaven is the introduction from the University of Minnesota. This is the tall little blue stem. It's 3 to 4 feet tall. This is very similar in stature, height, size, etc., to Calamagrostis Carl Forster that we see planted so much. In fact, I saw recently at the Plymouth Library a planting of Carl Forster and this Blue Heaven together, and they were very, very similar. So this is what Blue Heaven looks like in the fall. It gets a reddish or burgundy color. Here's a red picture of it. This was from Nuremberg Gardens a few years ago. And then there are many new forms of these little blue stem. This is Blue Paradise. It's very blue in the summer. And then Blue Paradise gets this dark purple color right now. So this is Blue Paradise on the right, and this is Smoke Signal on the left, and then a big Indian grass over there on the far left. So this is a picture I just took Thursday or Friday, the Arboretum's collection of little blue stem. And you can see the dark color that's coming in here, dark purple. This is Blue Paradise right here. This is one called Little Luke, which is a reddish one in there. I try to have 4 each of these plants. I'm going to talk about Spartina uh, at peril or at my own risk, I guess here. This is Spartina, which is one of our native grasses, a big grass with rhizomes, and very good for binding lake shores, but it's a great big grass, you know, for 4 or 5 feet tall in there. And then Blue Heaven is way back in here on the right. But you can see that beautiful color that you get with little blue stem. And then the next grass I want to talk about, I think is another wonderful native, is prairie dropseed. And this is again one that's good for upland conditions. Gee, did I cut this off of your handout? I hope not. I'm seeing that I'm having problems seeing it here, but I hope I left it on there. Oh yeah, I'm wrong page. So prairie drop seed has this cultivar Terra, which is short and very formal looking, very much a clump bunch grass. And it is about half the size of the regular species. Morning mist is another new form of prairie dropseed, more yellow. This is about how morning mist looks right now with yellow fall color. I've seen huge plantings of prairie dropseed. This is from a garden in Pennsylvania where they mass planted prairie dropseed, and then it turns into really kind of a wave of the seed heads. So you probably know prairie dropseed is a fragrant grass. It's one of our few grasses that has a fragrance in the air. It comes from the oil on the seed, and it's quite fragrant. And as it matures, it becomes less fragrant with the seed, but it is a cumin-like smell, or some people call it hot buttered popcorn. Occasionally I run into somebody who doesn't like the smell of this, but most people find it really quite attractive. So here it is at Nuremberg Gardens. And it's, again, a nice formal bunch grass. Now, maybe I should talk about this red grass. I don't have this on your list because I don't recommend this grass, Imperator blood grass, red blood grass. This grass was removed from Nuremberg Gardens. I took some of it, I actually planted it at the Arboretum, and the Department of Agriculture came to the Arboretum to inspect our planting because of this grass. So this is on a lot of noxious weed lists in other states. It is a grass that can grow well in water, near water, and it's a beautiful red color, but it is not legal to sell this in Minnesota. I actually thought it was going to die in our collection and I would not be able to keep it, but that has not happened. It is still growing there. And that might pop up on another one of the pictures of the grass collection. This is prairie dropseed in the shade, but it's not very shady, right? So this is under a stand of aspen on the St. Paul campus. So for the most part, most of these grasses like full sun. There are a few for shade, and we'll talk about those. But here's dropseed on a berm. You know, talk about dry, up in a really dry area, doing quite well there. And then I wanted to mention big blue stem. Now, big blue stem is one of our big mainstays in the prairie. And this is a grass that you find in the lower or wet areas. Sometimes, I think I have in your handout, mesic or mesic sites, that's like medium soil moisture. But big blue stem is kind of in the ditch. It can grow in the ditch as well as, but not so much upland areas. If it's there, it's going to be short. So what's happened with these native grasses is that there are a lot of named cultivars now. So I put on your handout there a lot of the ones for um, a little blue stem with little Luke and blue paradise and blue heaven and so on. The same now is happening with big blue stem. This is one called Dancing Wind. Um, Another one that I really like is called New Wave. And here, this is a green colored one. The previous one, Dancing Wind, is a lot of red in it. So really some nice colors with these. Another big blue stem called Black Hawks, you can see over here on the right. This is the most colorful upright big blue stem. Black Hawks is being sold now probably through, if it isn't, it will be soon at Bachman's, Otten Brothers. A lot of other nurseries have started to sell Black Hawks because it is upright and this dark, dark red. So a lot of people want a grass that's perennial, that's dark red or purple year round. So Black Hawks is as close to that as we have. But many of these blue stem, this is again a picture I took just recently at the grass collection. This one in the foreground here is called Lord Snowdon. And look at that grass. I mean, it's flopping all over the place. It's a lovely blue color, but it just doesn't have the stiff stems to hold it up. So in the background, not far away, here is that Black Hawks. So you can see that dark red in there standing up. That's Black Hawks compared to Lord Snowdon. So Lord Snowdon is not on my list for recommending it. Although I see it might still be on this list, right? Did I take that off or not? But you can see the fall color, and in the background, the grass that's really flowering a lot with those big white plumes, that's miscanthus. And we're getting to, miscanthus is on the list. We're going to talk about that. So another one of our native grasses that really grows in wet sites is switchgrass. So big blue stem will go halfway down the hill or towards the bottom, but in the water you can grow switchgrass or panicum. And panicum has, again, this really long list of different cultivars. And in the trials we did recently, Northwind, which is kind of over here hidden on the left behind Warrior, Northwind, Thundercloud, and Cloud9 came up really high on the overall evaluations across the United States. So those are big grasses, but they are ones that do have a tolerance for wetter sites, but there again, they really like full sun. And here's another purple one. This is a switchgrass that's purple and it's called Ruby Ribbons. If you go to the Arboretum, it's along behind the main building near the annual collection or near the tulips along the opposite side of the sidewalk from the rose collection. Ruby Ribbons is very low vigor. It's much smaller and less vigorous than Black Hawks, which is the other one. So Northwind is tremendous grass for being upright and stiff. Some issues with hardiness on this. We've never lost it at the Arboretum, but I know some people talk about it being not as hardy. It's from southern Wisconsin, from North Wind Nursery is where it was selected. I do like Prairie Fire. This is a beautiful, because this is what this plant looks like right now in the fall with these purple ribbons of foliage and red seeds. And then Cape Breeze, this is a newer form of switchgrass. It's kind of a short mound and quite wide in habit. Here is ruby ribbons on the left, and on the far left is Black Hawks, the year it was planted. So let's see the next picture. This is taken from the other side of that same bed. Red October is over here on the left. This is Cape Breeze, Panicum, and then Black Hawks. So lots of color and lots of different variation with these grasses. So now I'm going to switch to the list kind of in the center of your handout is grasses, sedges, and rushes for wet sites. And most of these are native, except a couple of them that I have noted. So a chorus, as you probably know, and many of you probably have tried growing a chorus, this is not, a chorus is not really a grass. It's in a different family, and it is very grass-like in its appearance. The native Acorus looks like more like an iris than it does a grass. But this little, probably this is gramineous, Acorus gramineus, this ogon. Ogon is one that you can find in the trade, and it's golden yellow. Now this is my garden, so okay, don't laugh because this is in a dry location under a silver maple tree. And this of course is tiny. It's here in the middle, and it's kind of a chartreuse color. And this is sweet woodruff around it. This is another sedge, Feather Falls. And then the hosta lancifolia is back here. So you can see how small this is. Now, this has lived for me as a perennial for a few years, but it is really under stress because it would love to be in the water, and it would love standing water. I originally planted it in this little pocket for color, for bright yellow color. I did not expect it to live. It has lived despite how dry this setting is, but I would urge you, if you want a small Acorus, look for this Ogon, and it has been hardy for me, and it's a really golden color, and it's like 6 inches, definitely less than a foot tall, 6 to 8 inches tall. So it's a tiny little plant. I don't have a water garden. I am envious of all of you guys with your water gardens. And so I have not had the experience of growing a lot of these plants, my water garden plants myself. But the ones I'm going to talk to you about, these are the ones that I know. But I think of a water garden as small plants. And that might be wrong, but a lot of what I'm going to show you and talk to you about are small plants. And so that might not be quite right. So on your list, other than the Acorus, is Carex muskingumensis. So this is the palm sedge, and this is one of my favorite grasses. If I talk to people about a few favorite grasses, or I have to pick a Carex that's my favorite, I often pick this plant. This is a true, it is a Carex, and it has the 3 ranked leaf arrangement that you can see when you look at this at the bottom. The leaves come off in 3 planes, let's say, 12 o'clock, 3 or 4 o'clock, and then what's at 9 o'clock. Those 3 planes are indicative of the sedges. They have 3 ranks for their leaves to come off the stem, and grasses just have 2. Grasses come off on each side of each other, but the Carex has got that 3 rank, and it's very conspicuous with this one. And that's why it has its name, the palm sedge. The more sun you grow this in, the more yellow it is. The more shade, the darker green it is. It has a big, thick, fibrous root system that is very, very dense. And if you grow this plant, it will kind of cement itself into your garden. And if you have water, it will get even bigger and more robust. It grows in some dry sites in my garden underneath a box elder tree. And It's alive there, but it's not robust. But it's living in a really dry site. The Muskingum River is where this plant gets its name. It is native in Minnesota down in Houston County, but otherwise we don't see a lot of it around native in the state. It gets a brown seed head on that you can see here, and it will self seed. And this is a more, I think those pictures previously were a little distorted. This is a more typical look of it in the sun with a chartreuse look to it. And then there are two forms of this Muskie gumensis that you can buy in the garden centers. And this is little midge. Now, little midge, again, is my thinking that water gardens need tiny plants. So I could be way off base here, but this is a tiny, tiny little plant. You can see my feet over there on the right of the picture. You can see how small this is. I bought this at Tangletown Gardens recently. We've had it for years in the collection. We had to make some moves, and in transplanting, this plant was lost. So I repurchased it, and Tangletown had this. There's also a form that's white striped on the edges. And I don't know if I have that picture in this or not. No, I don't. So Omi looks like this, except it has a white stripe on the edge of the leaf. It's more decorative. It's not as aggressive. So Omi is one to look for, and that's named after Wolfgang Omi. And then another one of my favorite plants is Chasmanthium latifolium, the river oats. This is a native plant for the United States in like Missouri, the Carolinas, Georgia, Louisiana, so on. Found in the river bottoms, the delta areas, in the woods. So shade and moist conditions are what this plant really loves. But here's a picture of it. Here's Chasmanthium over here on the left at Nuremberg Gardens. So you don't have to have really wet sites for it. It is very tolerant of heavy soils, clay soils, and it's 3 to 4 feet tall. Now, some people, let's go back to that. I thought I put another one in. Some people, especially in like Ohio is really where I've heard about it, think this plant is a nuisance because it self-seeds so much. So I have not had a lot of self-seeding at the Arboretum. I have had the plants die, and then the seeds come up right where the mother plant was, and it perpetuates as a perennial. It will self-seed, it will come up in different places in my garden, but it's never been a big problem. I think it's because it's really on the northern part of its range. So many of you probably know that Juncus is a great species that you should be using in your water gardens. Juncus has native species, European species. These are basically really, really water plants. Many people think of Juncus and they don't think of anything but, oh, that plant is going to grow in the water. That you have to have water to grow the Juncus. And we've seen ornamental forms of these now come on the market, the corkscrew and so on. And you don't have to have water certainly not standing water to grow any of these Juncus. In our collection, they are just in our regular clay soil that the Arboretum has. They're going to be, of course, shorter in drier conditions, but certainly a couple of these really worth trying if you haven't already. So our common rush, Juncus effusius, is a bigger plant, and what we see in a lot of lake shores and standing water in Minnesota. This Juncus inflectius is a European introduction. It's about 3 feet tall, and it has these steel blue round leaves. So the leaves are round, somewhat like an onion or a scallion would be, that round look, but they're stiff. And that stiff is sometimes in the common names of rushes, hard or stiff rush, because They're pointy and sharp on the ends, and then they're real stiff in the way the foliage stands out. The rushes have a different flower in botanical terms and the way it's arranged, and so they're in a family all their own. But you can see the brown, attractive flowers that are on this. So in the spring, when it blooms, you have these brown flowers and blue foliage. It's a very nice contrast. So Inflectious is a nice species that we've grown for years at the Arboretum. And the other one that we have is Path Rush, which is Juncus. This one might have missed your handout. So Juncus tenuis is the Path Rush, Tenuis. Tenuis is a plant probably everybody listening to this has walked on, because a path rush is common on compacted paths in the woods, through the woods. You can find it in the boundary waters, on the Superior Trail in the woods. This is a path, a walkway at Nuremberg Gardens. And path rush is less than a foot tall. The drier the site, the shorter the plant will be, but it can definitely grow in compacted sites. So I think rushes are really one thing to consider if you want something kind of grass-like in your garden. And this, I'm sorry to say, is another plant I missed to put on your handout. I'm so embarrassed because this is like the #1 sedge I would tell you to plant in a water garden. So Carex elata Bowles golden, sometimes it's called Carex elata aria, and Bowles golden is the common name. I think you can find this in the trade, probably mail order. If you have your plant sale or participate in that, this is a good plant to start selling at a plant sale. This plant is very hardy in Minnesota, and yet I don't see it as much as I'd like to. So it has this yellow foliage that's yellow all year long, and it's especially tolerant of shade and really tolerates standing water. When I've seen this plant in England, it's almost always been in the water, in a water garden. So I think of it almost as surviving like where a cattail survives. But here again, at the Arboretum, where we are growing it, it is not in standing water. And this is a picture of right near the Snyder building in front of some astilbe. So we have grown it in the heavy clay soils and shadier conditions. And yeah, 24 to 30 inches tall, really lovely yellow, bright foliage. So it tends to be kind of a slow grower. The flowers are pretty nondescript. There actually might be flowers on this. They tend to be greeny brown and kind of way up at the top here, not very noticeable. But this one is not a plant that's this one is not native to Minnesota. This is Spartina again, and I only put Spartina on the list here because this is great for lake shores. And this is a big issue with much erosion through the winter time or development along our lake shores. This is a native grass that has huge rhizomes, very good for binding soil and preventing erosion, but quite problematic in a garden. So I can't imagine somebody putting this in a little area, but I had to bring it up because it's such a great soil binder for our lake shores. And then the coney grasses, the coney areola was a perennial plant of the year not long ago. That's the real yellow striped form. There's also, this is here at Nuremberg, there's also a green form of Hakone grass. This is from the Chicago Botanic Garden. This plant likes moist shade. So moisture seems to be pretty much a requirement for this plant, but lovely kind of, people have called this the yellow waterfall grass because of the lovely way the foliage hangs down. So I have not seen this grow in water, but it does like moist conditions. And where it's native in Japan in the forest is in moist, shaded forest conditions. So I want to give you a couple of comments here about the human benefits of grasses. And you probably know a lot of these. They have a great natural appearance and they change through seasons. They've got a lot of different colors. We looked at those colors and so on. They tend to be fast growing and they provide this movement with the wind that is visually relaxing, especially now in the fall when the big grasses blowing. But they also have this susurration or the sound of wind through a plant that is very pleasing. But who am I to talk to you guys in the Water Garden Society about pleasing natural sounds? Because that's, of course, what you have with water gardens. And the sound and the movement of water provides so much benefit to us as humans that I think the grasses are just, they're way behind, but they're trying to mimic the wonderful sound and appearance of movement with water. But these are not characteristics to minimize. These are important things that we too often take for granted. But I know all of you and those of you that maybe are sitting outside where you can actually hear that sound of water are getting a double whammy today because you're out in nature and you have that wonderful sound. So we can try to do that a little bit with the grasses, but it seems much easier with water. I want to just mention miscanthus and then talk a minute or two about maintenance of grasses. I showed you the pictures of miscanthus at the grass collection, the big white flowers. There are 3 forms of miscanthus. All 3 of these do really well in wet sites. The first one on the top here is the one that's all the different cultivars, purpurescence, red flame, and so on. This top one is a problem in the middle Atlantic states. This has increased, it's along roadsides, it's covering Long Island, it's up towards Boston and so on. There's lots of issues with it as an invasive plant. Not so with Minnesota. I have not been called anywhere to see this top one as an invasive plant. The middle one, where my 6-foot brother is standing with his hand up, is the giant form, which sets no seed. That's a biomass fuel source. Lots of interest in that for those, those black blanket snake-like things you see for erosion control. Lots of those are filled with this middle grass now. And then the third one, Sacroflorus, in Minnesotans call this pampas grass, white along Excelsior, Route 7, along some of the interstates here and there in Minnesota. Very conspicuous when this one flowers. This one can grow in standing water. And we see it here. This is what Nuremberg Gardens used to have along their lakeshore. They got rid of all of that and they put in their restoration planting. You should only plant miscanthus where you can watch it so you won't have that self-seeding. So right now, purpurescence in the upper right, this is a beautiful grass in the fall, really, really nice. If you want to grow miscanthus, just grow one of these because more than one can cause the cross-pollination and the self-seeding. This is Sacroflorus. We see this sometimes. This is after the flowers have come. We see this sometimes. If you mow this off repeatedly, you can get rid of it. So I just want to make a couple of comments about maintenance of grasses because just yesterday, someone asked me about how shouldn't we be cutting down our grasses now this time of year? And I said, no, don't cut them down this time of year. Enjoy the winter interest and the movement in the fall and all through the winter time. But this is Calamagrostis, our most popular grass now in front of the Minnesota Landscape Arboretum in late winter. early spring, and you can see, if you look closely, you can see it's green at the base and it's starting to grow because it's a cool season grass like our lawn grasses. This is the first one that you want to clean up in the springtime, and cutting off all the tops and getting rid of the previous year's growth really does invigorate the plant and helps them. Occasionally, I see somebody will go in and cut them off before winter is over. If they have time on their hands, maybe, or they want to just really clean up a landscape, but try to leave 6 inches or so for some protection of that crown in the winter. The sedges don't need much cleanup. They are like hosta. They will die pretty much and melt away. So they are not going to need nearly as much cleanup. This is what a lot of grasses look like that are the warm season ones. After you cut them back, there's a few inches left there. We have a huge a huge mass to clean up at the Arboretum, and we burn off the big Asian ones. Um, if you're a homeowner, you can put these together with some twine, string, and then use a string trimmer or hand cut them off, cut them up, and then put them in your compost pile. But cutting back the tops early in the springtime is the time to do that. When we burn at the Arboretum, we burn those big Asian ones, but more and more, we are not burning the native ones because the native ones have those Lepidoptera that can overwinter down in the bottom of the plant. So the native ones we are cutting off to 6 inches. If we have to burn them, we do it every 2 or 3 years, but most of the time we just cut them off with a string trimmer, a blade trimmer, or hand tools. And then we take those tops and we put those in the compost pile. So in conclusion, I've got a list of resources here. The grass book that you can get online, it's free. There is a grass publication that is out at the Arboretum gift shop. If you go out there, you can get this grass publication. I have a lot of information up on a website at CFANS, Grasses CFANS, and my email is there if you have any other questions. So thanks so much for inviting me to talk today. And I look forward to seeing you guys next summer on your pond tour, which I'm definitely going to get to.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Meyer. That was an awesome presentation. I do have one question for you. In your opening slide, you had some grasses that were in like a boulevard. How far, neighborhood I live in, we don't have curbs and stuff. So in the wintertime when they plow, I mean, it gets thrown up into my yard quite far. What grass would be the most tolerant for being smothered by snow all winter long, being buried under the snowplow?
Yeah, that's a great question. So that boulevard planting was in St. Paul. That was a street not far from the St. Paul campus. And the side oats grama that was in there would do fine. I've also seen little blue stem do fine there, and I've seen prairie drop seed do well there. So those are native ones that are quite tolerant. Those are all warm season grasses, and they start to grow later in the summer. Later in the spring, really. So it isn't until around Memorial Day they start getting green. We don't see as much tolerance with our cool season grasses, especially Kentucky bluegrass and perennial rye. They seem to have really adverse conditions to salt, and the fact they start growing early. So some of the salt and debris has been washed out of the soil by the time the warm season grasses start to grow. So I would go with side oats grama, little blue stem, and prairie drop seed.
Okay. Then I have along my south side of my house, there I have several huge mature pines, and I'd like it's south facing, so I mean it gets the sun east to west all day long. I don't consider it really full sun because they're kind of underneath the pine trees. But would I be able to put some of those taller grasses along between the trees? I'd like to kind of like build a little nature fence using some of those taller grasses.
Huh. Uh, yeah, usually shade means short.
Okay.
So that's what the issue is when you put something in the shade, how big is that really going to get?
Okay.
With the grasses, I would say that's going to be a challenge. There's some shrubs like several of our native viburnums,
Which I don't
viburnum
like.
lentigo. Yeah, you got that. And that, what's the pagoda dogwood? I love that shrub. It's a small tree, very, very drought tolerant and shade tolerant. So for height, I think I'd almost go for something like that. Because the big grasses, I just imagine them getting kind of spindly and weak looking. Something like the anemone robustissima, that has a rhizome, but that is it's only about 4 feet tall, but that's a lovely plant, lots of flowers, lots of vigor, and very shade tolerant. But the tall grasses, there's hardly anyone above 3 feet for the
Okay.
shade.
All right. All right. We did have a question here. Let me grab that chat window open. Uh, Open up chat window. Where'd it go? Oh, here. Uh, Name of tall grass outside the arboretum.
Tall grass outside the arboretum. So we on the entryway going into the arboretum, maybe. Yeah. So we've got in the marsh there, that big tall grass that predominates the marsh going into the arboretum is Phragmites australis, or the common reed. And Phragmites, it's a nice native grass. There is an invasive form of that, and there's a lot of work going on at the Department of Transportation on controlling that. So what I call a black flowered form, or a much bigger robust form, is now being controlled across the state of Minnesota. But Phragmites is PH. My husband loves this plant botanical name because he thinks it's Frank, but it's Phragmites, Phragmites, or common reed. I think that's the one you're referring to. There is some of that Miscanthus sacroflorus along Route 5 just before you get in the Arboretum. We have been trying to control that, and it got on the back burner, so we now need to go back to that area and control it. But I think the one you're talking about is common reed.
Okay. We did have another question from Mel Bowman. Do you know of anyone who would be willing to come to her property and tell me what plants to choose? I've been trying to restore my 2 acres to native prairie, and apparently the information she's getting online is a little bit overwhelming.
Well, I don't know anybody that will do that for free. But I would reach out to people like Minnesota Native Landscapes. That's a commercial business. Prairie Restoration, I know, has done that. Landscape Alternatives, those are native landscaping firms that will do restoration projects. And it could be that they will come and make recommendations for you, and then that could be part of what their whole payment is to you. But I know with the landscape design companies, your garden centers will often give you kind of a recommendations or a sketch. And I'm not exactly sure about the restoration firms, but I would try them, because if you want to do a prairie, it's very difficult if it's sizable, because most homeowners do not have the right equipment. So getting the right equipment is kind of a challenge. And so I'd go with those Minnesota native landscapes, prairie restorations. Prairie Moon is another company that does sells a lot of seed and resources and landscape alternatives.
Hopefully that helps you, Mel. There's 4 different ones that you could contact to see if they
Yeah,
can help you.
I envy you. I wish I had the property where I could do a prairie restoration. I did one on my brother's property in Pennsylvania. I begged him to take a couple of his acres out of his 100-acre farm, and he did. It's nice. It's over his head. It's wetter in Pennsylvania.
Okay. Do we have any other questions for Dr. Meyer? Yeah, apparently the restoration firms weren't interested. They just want to give her a list of plants, but apparently she's not had any luck in getting them to start to
Oh,
grow.
yeah, I'm sorry to hear that because the last I knew, Prairie Restoration was going out, and most of the time they can't make recommendations unless they visit the site, depending on the topography and the soil type and so on. Um, yeah, they would come up with a list of plants, but hopefully they would be able to actually put those in for you as well. But always at a cost, though, right?
Yeah. Uh, Blue Thumb, Jan, one of our master gardeners, said try Blue Thumb. It must be a company.
Yeah, Blue Thumb has a lot of resources, and that is a great suggestion, right? Um, good idea. Thank you.
Okay. If there's no other questions for Dr. Meyer, we will let her get on with her afternoon. And again, thank you so much for taking the
My
time to
pleasure.
meet with
Thank you
us. And
so much. Yes.
hopefully we'll see you
No,
on the pond tour. And uh, if you're ever in the neighborhood, just give a shout out, and you're always welcome to stop by and visit my pond. So
thank you, Steve. Thanks to all of you for listening today. And maybe I'll see you at the Arboretum. Come
sounds
out
good.
and feel free to introduce yourself if I'm out there working. Have a great
Okay.
day.
Thank you. Okay.